Hi, I'm Allie. Join me for a redo and a fun new clasp, so make sure you stay tuned to the end for FreeForm Peyote. Since the video is a little bit old, we thought we would do a little revamp for you, and if you are an XL Box subscriber, this is your month design. Gather up your materials and we'll get started. So I have my supplies laid out here before me to do this lovely, beautiful design. Now remember, you can reach into your boxes or your stash and grab out all kinds of extras. FreeForm Peyote is amazing for adding in tons of different supplies and for using up supplies while making something that's really artistic. I have on here some 15-0s, 11-0s, 8-0s, and some Potomac crystal 2mm rounds. If you need details on those or links, check in the description below the video to link to that information, or if you want to check out the box. I find it the easiest to start with FreeForm Peyote for one, already knowing peyote. If you need to know peyote, check out some of our other peyote videos. But I have on here 4 groups of 4, and I have 6 groups of 4 of my 15-0s. I'm going to start out with my smallest bead, and then I'm going to go into using some of my bigger beads before I go in and use the specialty bead of the crystal. I know ahead of time, just from looking, and because you have the help of this video, that for every 4 15-0s, you're going to get 3 11-0s. For every 3 11-0s, you're going to get 2 of your 8-0s. And in that same space, approximately, 1 crystal and 1 15-0 are going to fit. That will help to keep it about the same size as far as width, but you'll get a little bit of wave back and forth because those measurements are not exact. I have on my thread and needle, and I'm using a size 10 needle with some .006 thread. Again, 6 groups of 4 15-0s. In that same span, remember that 3 11-0s will fit. I'm going to add 3 11-0s after those 6 groups of 4, skip over the last 4 of those seed beads, and sew through the next 4, thinking about all 4 of those, or 4-drop peyote, as a unit. Give a nice tight pull, and I did put a stop bead on there. It's easy to keep track of then, which sometimes is hard, which way I'm continuing. What is the start and what is the continuation? Once again, I'm going to add 3 of my 11-0 seed beads, skip over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, thinking about them as one unit there, and I'm going to go in and grab the next 4 beads. Once again, I'm going to do this one more time. 1, 2, 3 of my topaz, skip over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then once again sew into the last 4 beads and on my way out. So my thread went down, added on all of my groups of 6 15-0s, 6 groups of 4, and then I came back up and added 3 groups of 3 11-0s. For here, just to change it up a little bit, we're going to show that 2 8s are about the same size. So coming back and sewing towards me, 2 8s are going to go in, and I'm going to sew through all 3 of those 11-0 seed beads. Once again, 2 8s through the 3 11-0 seed beads. Do you want to change up the pattern a little bit? Go for it. You know once again that 3 of your 11-0s will fit in that space, so you're going to do 3 11s and sew through the 11s. FreeForm Peyote can be so much fun. From here then, coming out the end, I'm going back towards the stop bead again. This time I'm going to start with 2 of my 8-0s. Sew through the 11s that are already there. Coming out there, I'm going to go in and add 4 of my 15s because they're about the same size, and sew through the 2 8s that are already there. I'll continue with 2 more 8s in that same space and sew through once again the 8s that are already there. So anytime you're adding on to this freeform design, you're always sewing through the group rather than an individual bead. Now I'll go through and I'll keep going with design here. And I'm going to go in and add 1, 2, and 3 of my 11-0 seed beads. Come back through the 8s. And this whole row, I'll go ahead and add some 11-0s. I want to keep in mind as I'm designing that obviously the 8-0s, because they're a dominant gold color, are going to be really shiny. I'm also thinking in my head, I haven't even laid them out yet because I don't want to be tempted to use them, I have another shiny grouping here of some 1.8 millimeter Miyuki cubes. Again, these add a nice little shine and a little bit of a color pop, lightening it up. For these, just like the 8-0s, 2 of them are going to be used for 1 unit. I'm going to use some of these shiny beads really interspersingly. You can see in this beautiful finished product that Anna did, she has triangles that she's created, just going and creating those groups of 2, playing around with patterns, and starting out pretty random, and then going in and establishing more color and design. There's a lot of 11-0s and a lot of 15-0s because the other beads are going to be shinier or bigger, which is awesome because they create that texture, but they also really, really pop. So continuing on here with my design, I'm going to go in and look at what I think I should do next. And I'm going to once again continue with my 11-0s, just using them a little bit more. 3 go on, I turn around, and I add those in. You can also do FreeForm Peyote where the size variation does not match up. So in here I could do, say, 3 15-0s instead of my 4. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to do that and to keep track of your design. So I would suggest if you're just starting out, this is a great way to go in, know exactly how many beads fit in the space approximately, but there's just enough of size as well as dimension variation to create a nice freeform look. So I've added 4 of my 15-0s in both spaces here. You can see also that my beads don't line up perfectly. That's because, once again, the 8-0s are going to be bigger than the 15-0s. So they're just naturally going to create a nice wave along the project. Coming back here, I'll add in my first 2 of my cubes back through the 15-0s. Once again, I'll go in and I'll do some more of my 15s, 4 of those, skip over and go into the next grouping of beads. So if you know peyote, this is really a breeze. If you've never wanted to conquer or try freeform, it's really great with that size knowledge, knowing how many beads are approximately the same size as the others, and then just really have fun with this freeform design, playing around with what beads you add. And you can see because the beads are being added in a 4-drop, 3-drop, or 2-drop style, that's what's going to make it progress pretty quickly. Once again, when adding your 2mm crystals, I want you to add a 15-0 with that, and that's going to make that fit about even for you as well. So if you want to continue on, you can have fun creating and designing this freeform pattern just however you pick them up and however the design works. Again, just to draw attention to our sample piece here, you can do groupings and lines. This is a fun way to practice peyote patterns. Noticing you'll do a chunk with 15s, you might do a chunk of 8-0s, a little grouping here of some cubes, as well as just the random crystal poking on through and having fun creating that design. So once you've finished playing around with your freeform peyote and really having fun with the design elements, you're going to want to make your clasp and attach the clasp to the end of the bracelet. I'm going to make this clasp independently, and then I'm going to sew it on to the end of the bracelet. If you know your stitches really well, once you come off the end of the design, you can even do this as is on the piece. We're going to be starting our clasp section here, a little beaded bead, with our thread and needle independently, and then I'm going to add them on to the end and tie this off as an individual unit. This is going to be right angle weave, and we're going to start out with 4 of our 8 OC beads. Take your thread and needle back through 1, 2, and 3 of those beads, starting from the stop thread and going towards the longer piece of thread. That is now your first right angle unit. From here, 1, 2, 3 beads get added. My thread is coming out of the bottom of that 3rd bead there, and I'm going to sew into the top of that 3rd bead. What that's going to do is create my second right angle weave unit. See those 2 little groups of 4 there sitting next to one another? And I'm going to sew through bead number 2. I just sewed through bead number 1, which was the bead we shared, and up again through bead number 3. From here, yet again, I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 beads. This time I'm coming out of the top of that rightmost 8-0 seed bead, and I'm going to sew into the bottom of that bead. I need to get over to the right side of the new one that I just created, so I'm going to sew through my top bead, and I'm also going to sew down through my right bead. And you can see now, if you look, you have 1, 2, 3 right angle units. Now what we're going to do is round this out. So we're going to connect this rightmost bead here to the leftmost bead here, which is right next to the start of my thread. I want you to add 1 8-0 seed bead, and you're going to sew from the bottom there of that right hand bead to the bottom towards the top of the left hand bead. And I'm not going to pull it tight yet because I want you to see it come together. From here, you're going to add 1 bead coming out the top of the leftmost bead and going to the top towards the bottom of the rightmost bead. Now, as I pull this thread tight, this is going to go naturally in to a little cube. So I have my 4 sides there, all in a row for my cube section. From here then, what I want to do is connect all of those cubes along the exterior with my 2mm beads. My thread and needle are coming out right there, and what I'm going to do is, after connecting them, is get to one of the top beads. So I'm going to sew through the next bead in line. That's going to put your thread and needle coming out right next to that starter thread. And see how we have, so we're having all the sides of our building here. We have all the 4 walls in. And what we're going to do is connect the top of all those 4 walls with one of our crystals. So a crystal goes on, and we're going to sew through the next wall. Crystal goes on, we're going to sew through the top of the next wall. You can see how I'm rotating it and spinning my hand. Crystal goes on, sew through the top of the next wall. Crystal goes on, and we're going to sew through, again, that first wall that our thread was coming out of. Give it a nice tight little pull, and you can see those 4 crystals go in right there, connecting the 4 tops. Sewing up through then the side of one of my walls there, I'm going to sew through and get to the top, or what was the bottom of the wall. Now we made that the bottom with the crystals, and we now have, again, 4 beads here along the top that are not connected. They're the tops of our new walls. I'm going to go in here with my crystals, add a crystal, sew through the next of those 4 beads. Add a crystal, sew through the next one. Add a crystal, sew through the next one. Add a crystal, and sew again through the next one. Give a nice tight pull and get those nice and tight in place. You can see now you have this nice and easy little clasp section here with that right angle weave happening in every direction. From here, I'm going to sew along the piece here of the right angle weave. I'm just going to sew back till I get my thread ends coming out in the same place. They're right next to one another, and what I'm going to do is just tie them off and then burn down the thread ends. This is a really simple way to make a little beaded ball that can work as the clasp or closure. Once you have that all tied off and knotted, just take your threads out or your thread burner and burn off the ends of your thread. I'm going to use this now as its own independent bead here and its own little beaded section to go in and help create the clasp on my FreeForm peyote. Once you get finished with your peyote piece, doesn't matter how long it is, the clasp section is going to be the same. So we just made this little beaded bead, which is going to fit nicely inside of 26 seed beads, alternating between 11 O's and 15 O's. To attach the clasp section and do the clasp section, you're going to be coming out of your last piece of peyote stitch here. I want you to sew back a row rather than adding beads and continuing on. Then you're going to sew up towards the next row and then up the next row. So you're coming out toward the middle of your peyote design. When you look at it, you should have 1, 2, 3 rows, and then 3 rows after, and you want your thread to come out right there along the middle. From here, you can add whatever beads you want. I'm going to add 5 of my 15-0 seed beads. Then I'm going to go through and sew through 1 of my 8-0 seed beads along my beaded bead. Doesn't matter which 8-0 seed bead, which is wonderful. And then I'm going to add 5 more of my 15-0s. Taking my thread and needle, then I'm going to go back through the next line of my peyote stitch. So on goes the next line of the peyote stitch. Then once again, you can come back down through after sewing up through that peyote stitch there. You can see I'm just continuing with the last line of peyote. And I'm just going to turn the needle back upon itself, sew through, sew through the edge here, sewing through then the 11-0s next, coming right out through here then, reinforcing that clasp, sewing back up through the 15-0 seed beads, through that 8-0 seed bead, and then back through the 15s. If it weren't the 15s here that I was sewing up through in the clasp, I would be sewing through this loop again of 26 beads. To knot off your thread when you're doing freeform peyote, you have a lot of options because the beads don't line up exactly. What I'm going to do is I'm once again going to sew back through the peyote design, take it back a couple rows, grab on to a bridge thread. That's a thread that connects one set of beads to the other. So I'm going to sew underneath the thread here, connecting the 8-0s to the 11-0s, make a loop, sew through the loop once, sew through the loop twice. That's going to get you a nice sewer's knot, pulling that down into the interior of the design, then once again continuing to sew along the peyote stitch. Sewing through the seed beads and back up through the next line. You can knot off one more time, and then all you have to do is grab your thread burner and burn off your thread edge. Freeform peyote is so much fun, and it's going to be great to see everybody's different versions of this. This is also a great way to make a clasp for another design also, and to create even little earrings or a little pendant to match with this simple beaded bead style. Thanks again for joining me on this updated version of the freeform peyote, along with the little beaded bead clasp, so don't forget to watch into that. And remember, if you want to, you can look below the video in the description. We always do links there to our site if you want to check out the supplies online. Remember, also give a little thumbs up if you haven't yet to help promote the videos and to let us know that you love the designs. Thanks so much for watching, and enjoy the next video.